Also welcome today's statement. It's another important step forward, and I'll be booking my booster as soon as I possibly can. But can I ask my right honourable friend about the 12 to 15-year-olds and the encouraging news that we now have over 1 million of them have been vaccinated against COVID-19. But as those figures continue to rise, could I ask him to speak with his ministerial colleagues in the Department for Education to review the current regime of asymptomatic testing in our schools, which is extremely burdensome and expensive and intrusive, to make sure that it doesn't last longer than it needs to?
Mr. Speaker, I can tell my honourable friend, and I'm sure he won't be surprised, we work very closely with our colleagues in DFE, especially, of course, in that particular age group. And the issue around asymptomatic testing is something that we keep under review, and as soon as we can remove that, we will.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to pass on my thanks to the NHS for all that they're doing, and all the staff in the NHS for all that they're doing for the COVID vaccination programme. And I particularly want to pass on my thanks to my local public health team, who called me after I contracted COVID 10 days ago. They were incredibly supportive, incredibly thorough. And this contrasted, I have to say, with the national team who put the phone down on me when after one ring, they expected me to pick it up. I did, but they put the phone down on me. But I wondered if the Health Secretary was aware that the national test and trace team are expecting the local public health departments to pick up during the Christmas holidays as the national test and trace team go on holiday. But the public health team are going to have to pick up the slack when they're not doing their job.
Mr. Speaker, first, the honourable lady, like so many in this House, is absolutely right to point out the phenomenal work that the NHS has been doing, particularly on the vaccination programme, and also NHS test and trace on the work that they do, and also a UK HSA on the testing programme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In West Dorset, we were very fortunate to lead the way with the vaccinations in the first and second tiers. But, and I should say that was mainly thanks to our many GPs across the county who work tirelessly. But of course, our GPs don't just have to do vaccinations, they have to do many other things as well. And currently, Mr. Speaker, we are struggling, my constituents are struggling, particularly my older constituents, to get the booster jab. Could I ask my right honourable friend to support me in getting action to make sure that we can get that booster jab to my constituents who are not currently able to get it?
Mr. Speaker, firstly, my honourable friend is right to talk about the demand on GP services, and that is one reason why I announced just a few weeks ago the Winter Access Programme with a record amount of support, which will undoubtedly help. When it comes to the vaccination programme, GPs across the country are doing phenomenal work, but I want to make sure it's working in every part of the country, and if there's more that we can do in his area, we will, and be happy to meet with him.
Chris Bryan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted to say I have been boosted. So I'm grateful. I'm not sure everybody's grateful, but I want to ask about long COVID, because there's lots of evidence now that people who suffer from long COVID have had long-term neurological changes, and that is sapping the other provision of services for other people with neurological conditions. I just wonder, isn't it time that we had a strategy for brain injury across the whole of government, including every single government department, and not just his own?
Mr. Speaker, I know that the honourable gentleman speaks with a great deal of experience on this issue and has talked about it many times in this House. And he's right to link this to long COVID, and I hope I can reassure him with the work that is going on within both the NHS, in the department, and some of the research institutes into long COVID that the government is supporting with millions of pounds, and then also the work the NHS is doing with people that are suffering from long COVID, and listening to them about what more we can do.
Stephen Metcalfe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, whilst I was on a school visit, I was shocked to hear about the extraordinary abuse a head teacher had experienced from parents opposed to in-school vaccination clinics. And I'm glad to hear we are making progress on getting 12 to 15-year-olds vaccinated. But will you join me in encouraging schools to continue to do this? Thank them for all the work that they have been doing. And can he also tell me what more we can do to reassure parents and students alike that the vaccine is safe, it's effective, and it's in all our benefits?
Mr. Speaker, this is such an important issue, about the safety and efficacy of the vaccine. And I think one of the strongest reassurances that we can give to everyone is that that decision about this vaccine, any vaccine, if it is safe and effective, is made independently to government, to ministers, by world-leading clinicians in the MHRA, our, as I say, independent regulator, looking at the very best evidence that is available, and they continue to monitor that data and that information. As I mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker, in my statement, that when it comes to vaccination, for example, of 16 and 17-year-olds, one of the reasons that the JCVI was very comfortable to make the recommendation to me to offer a second dose to that cohort was because of the continuing work being done by our clinicians and the MHRA working closely together. So I hope that helps reassure my honourable friend.
Steve McCabe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I note that earlier this year, when the government was trying to extend its vaccine delivery programme, it was keen to promote the benefit of mobile units. I see they don't figure at all in the statement today. Could the Secretary of State tell me how many mobile units are currently being deployed?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, this is all about making access as easy as possible. And as well as the national vaccination centres, the grab-a-jab offers, we do have mobile units. I'm afraid I couldn't tell you exactly how many we have out at any one time. The number does change day to day and depending on location. But it is something I think that remains an important part of giving as easy access as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have our walk-in vaccination clinic at Longton Fire Station on Friday. So will my right honourable friend join me in encouraging everybody in Stoke-on-Trent South who's yet to have their vaccination or needs their booster to come forward, come to the walk-in on Friday, or get an appointment booked as soon as possible?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. I happily join my honourable friend that if you live in Stoke-on-Trent South, you've got this great new this walk-in centre, and please go on Friday, because the best way to protect yourself, your loved ones, is to get vaccinated.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. John Fagan from the Runcorn part of my constituency did the right thing and went for his booster jab last week. When he arrived, he was told they'd run out of supplies. What reassurance can the Secretary of State and the Department give me and my constituents, and actually the broader country, that there will be sufficient supplies for the booster rollout?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman understands I don't know the details of that particular situation, but I would like to reassure him and the House that for both whether it's our boosters offer of the evergreen offer of vaccination, that the country has the vaccines task force has more than enough supply.
Speaker, can I welcome the Health Secretary's statement, the rollout of boosters to the 40 to 49-year-olds, and also the fact you'll be able to book 5 months after your jab rather than 6 months. I need to declare my interest on both counts there, but thank you very much, Secretary of State. Would he agree with me that given that booster increases protection from symptomatic COVID up to 90%, it's in my interest, everybody's interest, to get that as soon as possible to protect ourselves, our loved ones and the NHS?
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker, I absolutely agree with my honourable friend. The facts and figures now speak for themselves, and this latest data that he is also just referred to, that's come from UKHSA today, more than 90% protection when someone has had their booster dose, and that, as he says, is not just protection for that individual but for their loved ones.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The NHS is under severe pressure. Too many people are sick, including those which are vaccinated, and too many people are still dying. Why won't the Secretary of State meet with Directors of Public Health who are tearing their hairs out because the government rightly has put so much investment into the vaccine programme but aren't putting their investment into other public health measures which would stop COVID becoming a disease of inequality?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Lady will know it's, of course, as I've said today in the statement, that the vaccines are absolutely central to protecting us against this virus. But it would be wrong for anyone to suggest that's the only thing that the government is focusing on. Of course, there's a lot more. And for example, I can draw her attention to the recent announcements we've made on antivirals.
Rob Butler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The enthusiasm of 16 and 17-year-olds in the Aylesbury constituency to get the jab has been extremely impressive. So given that they are a particularly key age group in our fight against COVID, will my right honourable friend thank them for their contribution to tackling the pandemic? And can he let them know how soon they can expect to get the second jabs in their arms?
Yes, Madam Deputy Speaker. First, the second doses for 16 and 17-year-olds will be available from Monday next week. Also, I would like to join him in thanking, in particular, the local schools for all the work that they have done in Aylesbury to help with that.
And finally, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, can I thank the Secretary of State for all his clear commitment to protecting all citizens in the United Kingdom where the control is. I'm a type 2 diabetic. This Saturday, between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock, through the local surgery, I will receive my COVID booster, as other priority cases will as well. So can the Secretary of State outline what discussions has taken place to ensure that before over 40s are able to access their booster, that the vulnerable groups in all ages, such as diabetics, etc., can access their booster in a timely manner throughout the UK? Decisions taken in this House set the marker for other regions to follow, including Northern Ireland. Thank you.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I mean, one of the reasons the Honourable Gentleman will know is that our vaccination programme has been such a huge success is because it is truly a UK-wide programme, and we're able to do that because of the strength of our union. I work closely with my colleague in Northern Ireland, and we coordinate together, we share resources, and when it comes to supply, of course that supplies for the whole United Kingdom, and in terms of making sure that people that might be particularly vulnerable have access, each of the devolved administrations has a slightly different approach, but we do work closely together and make sure the supply is there.
Thank you. That concludes that item of business. So now we come to statement by the Prime Minister. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Before I begin today's statement, I would like to say a few words about the sickening attack that took place yesterday morning outside the Liverpool Women's Hospital. On behalf of the whole House, I want to pay tribute to the swift and professional response by the extraordinary men and women of the emergency services, who once again showed themselves to be the very best among us. The Joint Terrorism Analysis Centre has today raised the nationwide threat level from substantial to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. The police are keeping both myself and the Home Secretary informed on developments, and we will, of course, in turn, keep the House updated on the investigation as it continues. And now, Madam Deputy Speaker, with your permission, I should like to make a statement on the United Nations Climate Change Conference, better known as COP26, which took place in the magnificent city of Glasgow over the past 2 weeks. It was the biggest political gathering of any kind ever held in the United Kingdom. 194 countries were represented. We had around 120 heads of state and government, 38,000 accredited delegates, and there were countless tens of thousands more in the streets and parks and venues outside. It was a summit that many people predicted would fail, and a summit that I fear some quietly wanted to fail. Yet it was a summit that proved the doubters and the cynics wrong, because COP26 did not just succeed in keeping 1.5 alive, it succeeded in doing something no UN climate conference has ever done before, by uniting the world in calling time on coal. In 25 previous COPs, all the way back to Berlin in 1995, not one delivered a mandate to remove so much as a single lump of coal from one power station boiler. For decades, tackling the single biggest cause of carbon emissions proved to be as challenging as eating the proverbial elephant. It was just so big that no one knew quite where to start. But in Glasgow, Madam Deputy Speaker, we took the first bite because we have secured a global commitment to phasing down coal. And as John Kerry pointed out, you can't phase out coal without first phasing it down as we transition to other cleaner energy sources. And we have, for the first time, a worldwide recognition that we won't get climate change under control as long as our power stations are consuming vast quantities of the sedimentary super polluter that is coal. That alone is a great achievement. But we haven't just signalled the beginning of the end for coal, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've ticked our boxes on cars, cash and trees as well. The companies that build a quarter of the world's automobiles have agreed to stop building carbon emission vehicles by 2035. And cities from Sao Paulo to Seattle have pledged to ban them from their streets. We've pioneered a whole new model, an intellectual breakthrough that sees billions in climate finance, development bank investment and so forth being used to trigger trillions from the private sector to drive the big decarbonisation programmes in countries like South Africa. And we've done something that absolutely none of the commentators saw coming, by building a coalition of more than 130 countries to protect up to 90% of our forests around the world, those great natural soakers of carbon. Mr. Speaker, none of this was a happy accident or inevitability. The fact that we were there at all in the face of a global pandemic is in itself the result of a vast and complex effort involving countless moving parts. Right until the very end, there was the real prospect that no agreement would be reached. And what has been achieved has only come about thanks to month after month of concerted British diplomacy, the countless meetings, the innumerable phone calls, the banging of heads at UNGA, Petersburg dialogue, at President Biden's climate summit, the Security Council, the G7, the G20, and the setting of an example, several examples by the UK, because again and again the task of our negotiators was made easier by the fact that the UK wasn't asking anyone to do anything that we aren't doing ourselves. We've slashed our use of coal so much that our last 2 coal-fired power stations will go offline for good in 2024. We've more than doubled our climate finance, providing vital support for poor and vulnerable nations around the world. We've made a legally binding commitment to reach net zero, the first major economy to do so. We've set a date at which hydrocarbon internal combustion engines will reach the end of the road. And we've shown the world that it is possible to grow your economy by cutting carbon, creating markets for clean technology, and delivering new green jobs that reduce emissions and increase prosperity. Every one of those achievements was not just great news for our country and our planet, but another arrow in the quiver of our fantastic team in Glasgow. A team led by the COP President, my right honourable friend, the member for Reading West. And from the moment he picked up the COP reins, he has been absolutely tireless in his efforts to secure the change that we need. And although I'm pretty sure that what he really needs now is a well-earned break, I don't think any of us here are going to be able to restrain it, to hold him back as he sets off pushing countries to go further still and making sure that the promises made in Glasgow are delivered and not diluted. But success has many parents, and I want to say a huge thank you also to the officials in my own COP unit, Downing Street and across government, in embassies UK embassies around the world and at the United Nations, who pulled out all the stops to make the event work and to shepherd through the agreements that have been reached. I also want to thank everybody on the ground at the SEC in Glasgow, security, catering, transport, the relentlessly cheery volunteers, the police from across the whole country who kept everybody safe from harm, and the public health authorities who kept us safe from COVID, and everyone in the Scottish Government. And I want to say, above all, a big, big thank you to the people of Glasgow, who had to put up with so much disruption in their city and who welcomed the world all the same. And I say to the people of Glasgow, we could not have done it without you. Is there still more to do? Well, of course, there is. And I'm not for one moment suggesting that we can safely close the book on climate change. In fact, I can think of nothing more dangerous, quite right, I can think of nothing more dangerous than patting ourselves on the back, Madam Deputy Speaker, and telling ourselves that the job is done. Because this job will not be complete until the whole world has not only set off on the goal to reach net zero, but arrived at that destination. A goal that, even with the best of intentions from all actors, cannot be achieved overnight. And while COP26 has filled me with optimism about our ability to get there, I cannot now claim to be certain that we will, because we have seen some countries that really should know better dragging their heels about their Paris commitments. But if, not this one, but if, and it is still a massive if, they make good on their pledges, then I believe that Glasgow will be remembered as the place where we secured a historic agreement and the world began to turn the tide. Before Paris, we were on course for 4 degrees of warming. After Paris, that number fell to a still catastrophically dangerous 3 degrees. This afternoon, after the Glasgow Climate Pact, it stands at close to 2. It's still too high. The numbers are still too hot. The warming is still excessive. But it's closer than we have ever been to the relative safety of 1.5 degrees, and now with an all-new roadmap to help us get there. Aristotle taught us that virtue comes not from reasoning and instruction, but from habit and from practice. So the success of the Glasgow Climate Pact lies not just in the promises, but in the move that the whole world has now made, from setting abstract targets to adopting the nuts and bolts programme of work to meet those targets and to reduce CO2 emissions. We're now talking about the how rather than the what, and getting into a habit of cutting CO2 that is catching on with not just with governments and businesses, but with billions of people around the world. And it is for that reason that I believe the COP26 in Glasgow has been a success, and that 1.5 is still alive, and that is something I believe that every person in our United Kingdom can and should take immense pride in, and I commend this statement to the House.
Sir Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in extending our thoughts across the House to the people of Liverpool who are in shock at yesterday's events and pay tribute to the response of the emergency services? Madam Deputy Speaker, can I start by paying tribute to the COP President? Whatever the shortcomings of the deal, his diligence, his integrity and his commitment to the climate are clear for all to see. And also to his team of civil servants. Their dedication, their expertise, their service, never in doubt, but always remarkable. They knew that COP26 was the most important international summit ever hosted on these shores. Why, Madam Deputy Speaker? The simple maths of the climate crisis. At Paris, we set out the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. That is the tipping point, beyond that, the world is set to see billions of people facing extreme heat waves, countless millions displaced from their homes, and the destruction of natural wonders like the world's coral reefs. The science doesn't negotiate, and no politician can move the goalposts. To have any hope of 1.5 degrees, we must halve global emissions by 2030. The task of Glasgow was to set out credible plans for delivering that. And whilst the summit has been one of modest progress, we cannot kid ourselves. Plans to cut emissions are still way short. The pledges made in Glasgow for 2013, even if all fully implemented, represent less than 25% of the ambition required. Rather than a manageable 1.5 degrees, they put us on track for a devastating 2.4 degrees. And that's why, according to the UN Secretary-General, the goal of 1.5 degrees is now on life support. So we need to deliver intensive care. And that starts by being honest about what's gone wrong. International negotiations are complex and they are difficult. And those that have dragged their feet the most bear the greatest responsibility. But the summit was held back by the Prime Minister's guileless boosterism, which only served to embolden the big emitters. The Prime Minister praised inadequate net zero plans. He called the Australia plans heroic, even though their plan was so slow that it was in line with 4 degrees of global warming. By providing this cover, the Prime Minister had little chance of exerting influence over the other big emitters, and we saw many more disappointing national plans. The Prime Minister also dressed up modest sectoral commitments as transformational. Earlier in COP, the government claimed that 190 countries and organisations had agreed to end coal. On closer inspection, only 46 of them were countries. Of those, only 23 were new signatories. And of those 23, 10 do not even use coal. And the 13 that remained did not include the biggest coal users, China, the US, India and Australia. And as things would move forward with no public pressure, the big emitters were emboldened. They clubbed together later in COP to gut the main deal's wording on coal. Only someone who thinks that promises are meaningless could now argue that an agreement to phase down coal is the same as an agreement to phase it out. And then there was the long overdue £100 billion in climate finance. It's still not been delivered, even though this money was promised to developing countries over a decade ago. Failure to deliver has damaged trust and created a huge obstacle to building the coalition that can drive action climate between the most vulnerable developing countries and ambitious developed countries. That coalition was the foundation of the landmark Paris Agreement in 2015, creating the pincer movement to maximise pressure on the world's biggest emitters, including China. It's deeply regrettable that at Glasgow we did not see a repeat. Instead, developing countries were still having to make the case for the long-promised $100 billion in the final hours of the summit. Given all of this and the imperative to revive the 1.5 degrees from life support, the question is this: what is going to be different in the next year in the run-up to COP27? And Britain has a special and particular responsibility as COP President. First, we need to reassemble the Paris Climate Coalition and build trust with the developing world. But cutting overseas aid does not build trust, it destroys it. So will the Prime Minister immediately commit to reversing those cuts? Second, there can be no free passes for major emitters, including our friends. We are doing a trade deal with Australia, where we have allowed them to drop Paris temperature commitments. That was a mistake. Will the Prime Minister put it right? Third, the Prime Minister is right to say we need to power past coal and phase out fossil fuels. But his ability to lead on the issue internationally has been hampered by his actions at home. It has never made sense for the government to be flirting with a new coal mine or to greenlight the Cambo oil field. So will he rewrite the planning framework to rule out coal, and will he now say no to Cambo? Yeah. Finally, will he sort out the Chancellor? The budget was delivered in the week before COP26, as world leaders began to arrive on these shores. It did not even mention climate change. It gave a tax break for domestic flights and fell woefully short of the investment needed to deliver green jobs and a fair transition. The Prime Minister has been the wrong man in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Glasgow has been a missed opportunity, a stumble forward when we needed to make great strides, more climate delay when we needed delivery, and 1.5 degrees is now on life support. We still have the chance to keep 1.5 degrees alive, but only with intensive care. We have to speak honestly about the challenge we face to rebuild the coalition that we need and to take on the big emitters. We can and we must change course. Thank you, Madam Deputy.
Prime Minister.
Well, if I may say so, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it's the usual pathetic attempt by the leader of the opposition to suck and blow at once. To congratulate the UK government for a success at COP, but somehow to attack myself. That's what he was trying to do, and I think it's pathetic. Let's take his points in turn. Australia signs up to net zero for the first time ever. Coal. No COP has ever mentioned phasing out coal before, Madam Deputy Speaker. 65 countries committed to phasing it out altogether by 2040, including the 4 biggest users of coal-fired power stations, Poland, Indonesia, and others. And Madam Deputy Speaker, he talks about climate finance, and the UK government rescinding its commitments. It is simply untrue, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have doubled our commitments to tackling climate change around the world and helping the developed world with £12.6 billion, as he knows full well, and that commitment is way outstrips what most other countries are making. And he talks about UK leadership throughout this campaign, which has been going on for 2 years to get the right result and to keep 1.5 alive. The UK has been way out in front under this government. We were the first major economy to legislate for net zero. 90% of the world has now followed us. At COP, we had one of the most ambitious NDCs, nationally determined contributions, of any country. If it hadn't been for the UK government, we would have had no inclusion of anything to do with nature and protecting forests at all, Madam Deputy Speaker. And they listened to us at COP because they knew that our 10-point plan was not only cutting emissions, but helping to generate hundreds of thousands of new high-wage, high-skill jobs. And that is how then the world can see that is a programme that will enable them to power past carbon and to develop their economies. And as a result of everything that we have done at COP, we have been able, Madam Deputy Speaker, to keep 1.5 alive. And I feel, listening to the Right Honourable Gentleman, he's finding it very, very difficult to reconcile himself to the fact of a United Kingdom diplomatic and environmental success. And I think if he really meant all those fine words with which he began about UK negotiators and about the COP, he should stick to that script, because that was the right one.
Theresa May.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. and I refer the House to my entry in the Members' Register. May I first of all echo the remarks made by my right honourable friend about the appalling attack in Liverpool, and the thoughts of everybody in this House are with the people of Liverpool. Can I congratulate the UK Presidency on significant commitments that were made at COP26, notably by governments on deforestation and methane, but also by individual businesses on their work to achieve net zero in their businesses. Can I say to my right honourable friend, and I'm sure he agrees with me, that there is much more to be done. He said it in his statement. The UK has an absolutely critical role over the next year with the COP presidency to ensure that those commitments made are delivered on, and to bring the intransigent countries, notably China, Russia and India, back round the table and to raise their sights on what they are willing to achieve. Will my right honourable friend agree that, and also set out what the government's immediate plans are for that work?
My right honourable friend is absolutely right about the vital importance of the private sector, and I think that this COP was a breakthrough in many ways, but not least because of the emphasis that it placed on getting the private sector in to help developing countries in particular to meet their carbon targets. But she's also right, Madam Deputy Speaker, in what she says about the role of the COP presidency, because my right honourable friend, the President of COP, continues in his office for a year, and we will use that period, working with our Egyptian friends who take over for COP27, we will use that period to hold our friends and partners around the world to account for what they have promised, because it's only if they keep to what they have promised that we will be able to deliver for our children, Madam Deputy Speaker, and that's what we intend to do.
Ian Blackfoot.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I associate myself with the remarks of the Prime Minister on the terror of the attack that we saw in Liverpool yesterday? We all stand together against those that would perpetuate such crimes. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me thank the Prime Minister for an advance copy of his statement, and I'm delighted that today the Prime Minister has remembered that COP happened in Glasgow rather than in Edinburgh, as he said last night. Maybe he could have led more from the front at COP if he had actually known what Scottish city the conference was taking place in. But in fairness, Madam Deputy Speaker, it is right to acknowledge that there was at least one member of the UK Government who committed himself passionately to the Glasgow conference. The UK President of COP, the member for Reading West, deserves credit and the thanks for the role that he has played over the course of the last few weeks and months. Madam Deputy Speaker, we all know that the Glasgow Climate Pact is far from everything it should be, but it does contain many positives for us to build on. Whether or not it succeeds now depends entirely on whether countries deliver on the commitments they made, and we need to hold them to that. And that is the only way to truly keep 1.5 degrees target alive and make sure that ultimately that we accept all of our responsibilities to deliver on that. If that urgent leadership is to be shown, then the example of that leadership needs to begin at home. The Scottish Government led on climate justice throughout COP. We were the first country to pledge funds for loss and damage to help those vulnerable countries who have contributed least to climate change but are suffering its worst effects. This is about reparation, not charity. So will the Prime Minister reverse his cuts to international aid and follow our First Minister's lead? Will he back and contribute to the creation of a loss and damage facility? The Glasgow Climate Pact also contains a commitment to increase nationally determined contributions by the end of 2022. So, can the Prime Minister confirm that the UK will urgently update its own NDC commitments? And meeting our targets also means rapidly increasing investment in green jobs. Prior to recess, the Prime Minister made a commitment to go and look again at the issue of investment in tidal stream energy. So now that the Prime Minister has presumably looked into this, can he today commit to a ring-fence fund of £71 million for tidal stream energy as part of the Contracts for Difference process? And finally, on carbon capture and storage. Now, I know that the Prime Minister is expecting a question, and I make no apology for the fact that I will keep asking these questions until promises are made to Scotland's North East are finally delivered. And let's not forget The UK Exchequer has taken £350 billion of tax revenues out of the North Sea oil. It's now our responsibility to make sure that we invest in carbon capture and storage. Last week, INEOS added their voice to the growing shock and anger that Track 1 status for the Acorn project was rejected by the UK government. So will the Prime Minister reverse this devastating decision and back the Scottish cluster?
Well, I thank the right honourable gentleman, and I should say that, of course, just taking his points in reverse order, the Acorn project remains a strong contender, as I've told him several times across this dispatch box. He shouldn't give up hope. It's a very interesting project. We will look at it. On our NDCs, the UK is already compliant with 1.5 as a result of the pledges that we've made, both by 2030 and 2035. So if we can deliver on those, then we will be able to. We believe we'll be able to restrain our emissions. I've told him before that I'm interested in tidal power, and I'm interested in contracts for difference for tidal power, and I think he's right that there should be investment by the government in making sure that we have a tidal power industry in this country in the way that we have a wind power and a solar power industry in this country, because all the evidence is, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the costs come down, and that is the role of government. And finally, on his point about the whereabouts of COP, as he will well understand, Madam Deputy Speaker, it would never have been in Scotland at all. It would never have been in Scotland at all had Scotland not been part of the United Kingdom.
Greg Clark.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I join the warm congratulations to the COP President and to his team? And in terms of the location, to acknowledge the role of my right honourable friend for Maidenhead in securing COP in the UK and Glasgow to give us the opportunity for this great exercise of British diplomacy. Will the Prime Minister recognise that during the year ahead, as well as holding countries to their contributions, there is the important opportunity to make scientific progress and progress in innovation, which will be at least as important in securing the ambitions that were inked in Glasgow? And will he say a bit about how UK leadership over the year ahead can advance our ambitions in that score as well?
I thank him very much, and as he knows, the UK has virtually doubled our investment in R&D, and Sir Patrick Vallance, the government's chief scientific advisor, has said we want to focus on climate change, on green technology under the National Science and Technology Council, and that's why we're putting almost £22 billion into R&D. The opportunities are immense, and the opportunity to reduce the cost for the consumer of heat pumps, of electric vehicles and other green technology is also immense.
Ed Davey.
Can I associate myself and my party with the Prime Minister's remarks on the horrific attacks in Liverpool? Madam Deputy Speaker, we'd all hoped that the UK would lead the world to a bold agreement at Glasgow to turn the tide on dangerous climate change. Despite the efforts of the COP President and the excellent UK negotiating team, regrettably, the agreement fell short, potentially dangerously so. Yet there's still an opportunity for the UK to drive global climate action by cleaning up the City of London. Fossil fuel investors raise billions of pounds in this very city for coal and oil projects around the world. While China and India did stop a better deal on fossil fuels at COP, they can't stop the Prime Minister from showing leadership here in London. So will the Prime Minister stop dirty fossil fuel money for global coal and oil projects from being raised here in the City of London?
Prime Minister.
The right honourable gentleman knows very well that after UK leadership, we secured at COP an end to the financing of coal around the world, of the end of international financing for coal around the world. China has done that. That's led to a number of other countries immediately following suit. and progress is being made. The UK is, as I said in my opening statement, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK is also abandoning export support for hydrocarbons, and we are going to be followed by other countries around the world.
Andrew Mitchell.
It's clear, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the COP in Glasgow has gone better than many of us feared, but there are, as I'm sure my right honourable friend would agree, no possible grounds for any complacency. Will he use the remainder of the UK presidency to redouble efforts to share excess vaccine doses with developing countries, quite apart from making us safer in the UK? It will also bolster internationalism and British international leadership in the meetings ahead envisaged in the Glasgow Agreement.
Yes.
Prime Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend, and yes, indeed, although vaccines were not discussed at COP per se, there was a long discussion at the G20 in Rome, and the UK has a fantastic record of supporting cost vaccines around the world, 1.5 billion AstraZeneca doses, to say nothing of the huge contributions that the UK has made both to Gavi and to COVAX to ensure that people around the world get vaccinated, because nobody is safe, Madam Deputy Speaker, until everybody is safe.
George Harth.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for the comments he made about the appalling attack in Liverpool yesterday? And having spent some years on the Intelligence and Security Committee, I'm aware of the fact that in many attacks, those involved in it, I know it's too early to say at this point, were on the radar of the security services. If that proves to be the case in this incident, will the Prime Minister undertake to look at how those cases are kept under review? And can I add my voice to others who've said on COP26, it's really important going forward that those who are currently standing outside the tent of those who agree are brought into it. So can he give us some indication of his strategy for doing that?
Prime Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend on his point about picking up potential terrorists earlier. He's absolutely right, and he will know from his work on the ISC that the potential for cross-tabulating, referring between the various data points that we have is, I think, the way forward, and that may help us if we can do it in a sensitive way to predict more of the problems that have been cropping up. As for bringing in people into the tent, I think he's referring to ensuring that everybody in the developing world feels that they are being properly represented in these conversations. Is that what I do? Yeah. So I see he's talking about India and China and others, and I'm sorry, Madam, it wasn't entirely clear. I think the House will forgive me. It wasn't entirely clear from his question which people he wanted. I want everybody brought into the tent for the avoidance of Madam Deputy. And with India and China, with India in particular, what needs to happen is that we need to work with the Indian government that are already doing some very impressive things to show how, with new technology, we can help that country to power past coal. They're already with the One Sun World One Grid project. They've got a huge amount of renewables already going, but the UK can take a leading role with partners around the world, building the coalitions of support and investment by the private sector to help even an economy as huge as India's to make this transition and make it much farther and much faster, Madam Deputy Speaker, than people currently think possible. Look at the speed with which the UK has done it. Other countries around the world can do the same.
Andrew Murison.
Can I congratulate the Prime Minister on his Glasgow achievements? Can he say what is being done to remedy the international shortage of critical minerals to make semiconductors, without which the achievement of our 2035 targets will be impossible? And what more can he do to grow our own Silicon Valleys to reduce our reliance on China and Taiwan?
Prime Minister.
My right honourable friend makes an extremely important point. The resources are there are adequate supplies. The problem lies in the supply chains. And that is an issue that we are working on together with our American friends and other partners around the world to ensure that there is no disruption in those supplies of critical things, particularly semiconductors.
Barry Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First, may I pay tribute to the Right Honourable Member for Reading West. He has gained enormous international respect for the diligent, courteous and tenacious way in which he conducted the negotiations as President of COP26. Given that Article 4 of the Glasgow Climate Pact requires us to accelerate the phasing out of fossil fuel subsidies, can the Prime Minister tell us whether the 130% super tax deductions announced by the Chancellor will now have a climate filter imposed so that the taxpayer does not end up paying the full cost of projects like the Cambo oil field, and whether the government will use the $27.5 billion windfall from the IMF special drawing rights to significantly scale up their provision of climate finance to developing countries as demanded under Articles 3 and 5.
What I can certainly tell him is that the 125% super deduction that he rightly refers to will be of great assistance to companies across the whole of the UK in investing in new, clean, green technology, and that is the way forward.
Laura Farris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. One of the most significant diplomatic achievements of the COP was getting 130 countries, including the US and the BRIC economies, to agree to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030. However, we have been here before with the New York Declaration in 2014, which ultimately was unsuccessful because it lacked any enforcement mechanism. Could my right honourable friend say how he thinks this time we can ensure that it will be different?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and my honourable friend makes an absolutely crucial point. And this time it will be different, Madam Deputy Speaker, because what happened at COP26 in Glasgow was that you had about 40 leading global financial institutions that pledged that they would no longer invest in companies that supported or made their money out of deforestation. And you also had the companies themselves, big commodities companies whose names I'm sure my honourable friend would be familiar with, saying that they would no longer invest in products that were grown as a result of deforestation across the world. And the agency for holding both those sets of businesses, both the banks, financial institutions and the companies to account, will be customers, will be account holders, will be consumers across the whole world who will take their investment away from those companies if they fail to honour those commitments. And that is a huge change that's taking place across the world.
Jessica Morden.
It's a welcome acknowledgement at COP that the world cannot decarbonise without steel, whether it be for wind turbines, electric vehicles, energy-efficient buildings or infrastructure. Yet it was very disappointing that in the budget there was little to support the steel industry to decarbonise, little help with energy prices and no mention of the already small Green Steel Fund. So what practically are the government going to do to support our industry? Nuts and bolts, as the Prime Minister said earlier.
Prime Minister.
Well, it's always worth remembering, Madam Deputy Speaker, that steel output fell by 50% under the Labour government because of their reckless mismanagement of the energy issue. What we've done is put about £600 million into relief for the steel industry to help it cope with high energy costs, and a £315 million fund to transform steel and help it to move towards clean, green energy. That's what's needed, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Alberto Costa.
I thank the Prime Minister and the Honourable Member for Reading West and all the teams for the enormous work that they've done in putting together a great programme of the UK, in partnership with Italy, hosting COP26. Can I ask the Prime Minister to reassure the good people of South Leicestershire, and for that matter the country, that the agreement that his government has entered into and the policies and bills that he'll bring before this Parliament won't just help improve the climate, but will bring brilliant jobs to the people of South Leicestershire as part of the Green Deal economy that we're all looking forward to.
Prime Minister.
Yes, I thank my honourable friend. I should have renewed my thanks to the Italian presidency of the G20, co-presidency of COP, and Mario Draghi, who did an outstanding job throughout the period. And yes, he's totally right, because the Green Industrial Revolution, the 10-point plan, in the year since it was the 10 points were put forward to business around the world, they've secured £15 billion in investment in green technology in this country, many tens of thousands of high-wage, high-skilled jobs, and that is the future, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. New Delhi is now heading into a pollution lockdown because of the emissions that have affected the people there. The poorest people in the poorest places all around the world suffer the worst from pollution. So can he tell us what is he going to seriously do to bring China, Russia and Australia and others on board to get rid of their coal production? And also, the answer that he gave to the member for Kingston Surbiton was less than clear. Can he be absolutely now clear there will be no British financing whatsoever for any new fossil fuel industries anywhere in the world?
Prime Minister.
Yes, so that's on the first point of the last point you made. Yes, of course that's right. And we're abandoning export finance, and I made that clear earlier on. We're abandoning export finance for the hydrocarbons industry, and that's a massive change, which has been difficult, because there are businesses in this country that have benefited from that export finance for many years, but we're making that change because we want the world to move away from hydrocarbons. As for what he says about India, I accept the points that he makes, but what we will do, as I think I said earlier on, is we will help the Indian government in any way that we can for them to move beyond coal as fast as they can. And actually, of course, it was disappointing to see the language changed from phase out to phase down, but we've never had any commitments on coal whatever in COP before. I think what will now happen is actually that the global peer pressure on countries to move away from coal will intensify very rapidly, and the change will happen much faster than people think.
Dr. Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. After the downfall of the Soviet Union, it was discovered that various multilateral agreements that we thought we had over things like biological weapons had been systematically flouted. What confidence can we have if open societies observe the rules but closed societies cheat? Is there a regime in play to make sure that we would discover that?
Prime Minister.
One of the things that we agreed at this COP, and one of the reasons I believe it is so historic, is that we finally agreed the Paris rule book, which contains, amongst other things, provisions for transparency, agreement about how we measure what we're trying to do around the world. That's immensely significant. And that gives a tool to everybody who cares about it. And even in closed societies, about which my right honourable friend knows a great deal, even in closed societies where they may not take voters very seriously, there are consumers that they take seriously, and people who are willing to protest, who they take seriously as well.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The President of COP has undoubtedly done an excellent job, but frankly that's no thanks to the Prime Minister, who has consistently undermined climate leadership, whether that's by going ahead with an oil field at Cambo or cutting aid. 1.5 degrees is hanging by a thread, and the vulnerable countries feel betrayed, so a little bit more humility might be in order. But the Prime Minister says that we're not asking others to do anything that we're not doing ourselves. Will he demonstrate that's the case by requesting an urgent and transparent audit by the OBR, independent of the Treasury, of all our own domestic fossil fuel subsidies, with a view to phasing them out as soon as possible, yes or no?
Again, I think she's rather like the right honourable gentleman. She's trying to have it both ways, to suck and blow at once. She can't say it was a successful COP and somehow attack the UK government. I really don't. I simply fail to see the logic. And what we are doing, what we are also doing, is we are moving beyond coal by 2024.
Order. Mustn't shout at the Prime Minister. Everyone will have a chance to ask their question, and the honourable lady certainly mustn't shout at me. Let's try again. Sir Edward Lee.
Go for it. Could I urge the Prime Minister and other world leaders not to get ahead of public opinion on this? The people of Gainsborough South West Ward, which I represent, the 27th most deprived ward in the entire country, are not so much worried about the future of the Great Barrier Reef in 50 years' time. They're worried about their great big bloody heating bills now. And they are heavily reliant on gas, of which we have abundant supply. And manufacturers in northern levelling up towns are worried about their competitiveness with China, as more and more regulations are imposed on them. And to be fair to India, there are millions living in Uttar Pradesh, living in dire poverty, whose emissions are very low. How do we represent them? They live, their whole future depends now, this minute, on fossil fuels. Otherwise they might literally starve. Be realistic.
Prime Minister.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend. Of course, we must be realistic, but what we have seen is that it is entirely realistic to move very rapidly to renewable energy and to see the cost of that renewable energy fall vertiginously, as it has done. 60% the cost of wind has fallen just since 2015. Solar likewise. And so I urge him to tell his wonderful electorate in Gainsborough that this is a massive opportunity for us. We have first mover advantage, Madam Deputy Speaker. We're going, as we did in the first industrial revolution, we're going with this green industrial revolution now, and I believe it will be of massive long-term benefit to people across this country.
Barry Sherman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, will the Prime Minister agree with me that if we've got hope, any hope, of keeping 1.5 alive, we need to liberate the President to lead with all party support, a kind of revolution across our country, working together across party to involve every community, every town, every city, because if we don't grasp this, with our constituents and with the people that we represent, we won't get there. It is vital that this becomes a campaign with great leadership, but with full support of every community in the land.
Prime Minister.
Well, I'm very grateful to the right honourable gentleman. If he's offering full support from the opposition benches to the government, then I think he's absolutely right.
Andrew Salute.
Doesn't the landmark agreement to support South Africa's just transition show that even economies heavily dependent on coal can seize a bright and sustainable future and strengthen their economies as well as the UK's?
I thank my right honourable friend who is the trade envoy to South Africa. And I thank the government of South Africa, led by Cyril Ramaphosa, who has taken an extraordinary step and has built an international coalition for South Africa to decarbonise its energy system. It won't necessarily be easy, but it's a way that we can have a just transition for South Africa, and countries around the world, including the UK, are coming together to do it. That is the model for progress that we can make with so many of the big emitters, as the gentleman, right honourable member for Knowsley, was saying. That's the way forward with the big emitters around the world.
Hilary Benn.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. All of the commitments made by countries in Glasgow only have credibility to the extent that they are backed up by plans at home to deliver on the promised emissions reductions. It's now a question of counting. Let's take an example. Eventually, all of the 23 million gas boilers in this country are going to have to go. The government says its target is for there to be installed by 2028 600,000 heat pumps a year. The Heat and Building Strategy, recently published, provides enough funding to help support the installation of 30,000 a year. Why is the government's plan for decarbonising home heating so far short of what is required?
Prime Minister.
He's making an important point about the need to decarbonise our heating, but it can be done. There's great variety in the housing stock of the UK. And I believe if we go on the track that we are with investment, supporting, priming the market, we will be able to bring down radically the cost of ground source heat pumps and all the other ways that you can give people the heating they need in a clean, green way. That's what we're going to do.
Dr. Neil Hodson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I congratulate the Prime Minister, the COP President and your teams on your historic achievements in Glasgow. For me, it was reassuring to attend the conference and see nature and sustainable farming at the heart of the programme. Does my right honourable friend agree that food production and looking after the environment go hand in hand? And this is what our fantastic British farmers do each and every day.
Prime Minister.
I passionately agree with that, and I know that UK farming is getting cleaner and greener the whole time, and I pay tribute to the UK farming industry, which leads the world in setting standards.
Deirdre Brock.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Commitments are one thing, actions are another. For the UK to deliver on its promises and commitments in the COP26 agreement,